She's passionate about women's rights. She's heavily involved in the Democratic Party. And Amber Allen is also a mom and a journalist. I sit down one-on-one with Amber for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And listen to this interview later on iHeartRadio. Amber Allen.
Hi.
It's so good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are the founder of Make Progress South Carolina, and you're also obviously precinct director for the Charleston County Democratic Party.
Yes, sir.
And you've helped a lot of people get into office, from what I understand.
Yes, it's been an incredible experience. So I've enjoyed every step of the way.
What is it like to be you these days?
I'm busy because I'm also a mom of 2 young children, Penelope who's 7 and Evan who's 4. And I have a husband who has created this space for me to be able to be out in the community as much as I am. So busy and constantly juggling and not always feeling like I'm juggling it very well, but I guess I'm getting some things done.
You talk about the community. What is it like to serve your community these days?
Well, you know, I've always, I have a background in, first in journalism and as a newspaper reporter, editor, whatever. But since becoming a mom, I've kind of fallen into the realm of community organizing. I helped lead a statewide coalition for families back in 2014, 2015 to keep freestanding birth centers alive in South Carolina. They were facing closure due to a reinterpretation of the state statute. And that was very effective. Legislators did not know what was coming, and we really made an impact with Governor Haley at the time. And what I feel is most, I don't know, the thing that I really take home is that these people were contacting their local, state, and federal officials for the first time and taking that action. So really empowering them to know that their voice can be strong. But now I've kind of fallen into working for the Democratic Party, and I think this is such an amazing and exciting time to be a Democrat, especially here in Charleston. So I'm really excited for the work that I'm doing here.
What does that work like in 2019?
In 2019, well, right now, just kind of building on the gains that we made in 2018, especially with precinct organization. That's kind of my bread and butter, and I've been blessed to be able to go to other counties to talk about developing their precincts, kind of spreading the gospel of precinct organizing, because when people feel like they're part of a community, they really feel empowered and they feel like their voice is stronger when they work together. So in 2019, we're just making more inroads in the community. We have some pockets to fill on Johns Island and in North Charleston. So recruiting people to help be a part of a great coalition of Democrats.
Why haven't those pockets been filled on Johns Island, North Charleston?
You know, that's a good question. I think our precinct organization has been really strong, where we've had established clubs for a long time, like James Island, West Ashley, East Cooper, and the Peninsula. There really hasn't been, at least in the past couple of years, a strong club presence on Johns Island. North Charleston has struggled. I don't know, for whatever reasons. I'm not entirely sure, but since Colleen Condon became the new chairwoman, she and Elizabeth Jordan have really taken an interest in developing those clubs and making sure that we're spreading the knowledge around, so we're not becoming silos. We really want to make sure that these places feel like they have the tools to be successful in their areas.
What knowledge should they know, and what are those tools?
Well, the tools are just like, I don't know, sometimes just like bread and butter, just like, how do you even get started as a club? Like, what do you need? Like, you need an executive committee, you need bylaws, you need to take optional dues of your members, like even knowing to put your event on Facebook. Like, social media is such a powerful tool these days, but also being flexible and knowing that not everybody is on social media. So just like those bread and butter tools. And then we're also, different club leaders are sharing their knowledge with the people that are just starting out or trying to really grow their club.
And I wanted to go back earlier to obviously the birth centers. I know
Sure.
that you all were working with the legislators at the time.
Yeah.
Walk me through that process.
So I'm glad that you asked me that. That because of the pushback that we had in 2013 and 2014. I got my dates mixed up. We were able to keep DHEC from closing birth centers. They wanted obstetricians or collaborating physicians to be able to come to a freestanding birth center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But what was the unintended consequence is that no collaborating physician is going to sign an agreement like that because they can't be available, they can't go on vacation, and they also can't get medical malpractice insurance. So it's just not feasible. And then on the other end, if there is an emergency at a freestanding birth center, there's no time to wait for a physician to come to you. You need to go to the collaborating hospital for transfer. So because of our pushback, DHEC kind of put the brakes on closing birth centers. And since then, we've been trying, albeit unsuccessfully, to get legislation passed to get the small amount of midwifery-owned birth centers to be accredited and just operate on a certain set of standards, and also making sure that their collaborating physician has hospital privileges. And unfortunately, we've seen some pushback within our own community that they don't necessarily want to operate on those sets of standards. So for the time being, ever since then, we've had a proviso in the state budget passed every year that just kind of makes things kind of go the way that they've operated since the 1980s.
What is that proviso?
The proviso, I don't know exactly what the language states, but it just kind of basically goes back to what things were before DHEC made this state statute reinterpretation back in November 2013.
Sure. If DHEC weren't involved in this, what would happen?
Well, you know, birth centers were operating just fine before. You know, what happened is that there was a poor outcome in a birth center that's now closed, I think in Fort Mill, where the midwife made a mistake. And this is just what I understand from the situation as a consumer, as a healthcare professional, that she made a mistake and that the baby ended up dying, and that made DHEC kind of look at to some of the practices, and they realized, you know, there are birth centers in our state that are not operating on, they're operating on certain different kinds of care levels. And both of my children were born at Charleston Birthplace, and they are nationally accredited and have an amazing staff and have a collaborating hospital, really great birth outcomes. And so our birth center kind of led the charge to try to get the rest of the birth centers on board with national accreditation, and that has been met with mixed feelings.
How many were you trying to get on board?
Well, at the time there were 6, I believe. The Fort Mill birth center closed, and then there was another birth center in Columbia that closed, and it looks like there is a birth center in Greenville that is closing. So I think as of right now there are 4 in our state.
And when you talk about those hospital privileges earlier, what are they?
Well, hospital privileges, it's when the collaborating physician, as a nurse midwife or a licensed midwife, they work hand in hand sometimes with a collaborating physician. So when a midwife has a question, because they are so knowledgeable about normal birth, whereas like an obstetrician comes in when something happens outside the realm of normal. Or there's the pediatrician if there is a question about the infant after the birth of the baby. And so it's important for that collaborating physician to have hospital privileges so they can meet the midwife and the client at the hospital if they need to be rushed to the OR for a cesarean section. So it's just important to have that process in place so the patient gets the best care and the baby also gets the best care.
You talk about legislation. How many do you have on the Democratic side of your mind?
I guess I don't really understand the question.
You say you're having a hard time getting legislators on board. How many on the Democratic side are you trying to get?
Well, it's interesting. There are, I think for the most part, Democrats in the state house have been very open to passing this sort of legislation. There are a few legislators that don't want to get on board with being nationally accredited because they don't want that kind of oversight. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out, what's the best way. How is the mom and the baby,
Sure.
Going to receive the best care in that she's going to walk into a situation where she knows that this staff is well equipped for the birth that she wants to have. So honestly, Senator Marlon Kimpson has been a huge champion for this particular cause. He was my state senator at the time that all of this was going on, and it's just been unfortunate that we haven't been able to get it passed, but we do have Republicans and Democrats working together because they do realize that this is a great health care solution to especially the wider maternal mortality issue in South Carolina.
What are the other solutions?
What other solutions?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, as far as the maternal mortality question, in our state, a lot of rural hospitals are either closing or they're closing the maternity wards. So families are having to drive 1, 2, 3, 4 hours just to get just to have their baby, especially if they don't have any midwives practicing in their area to do home birth, or if they have birth center birth. So that prevents a lot of issues with getting adequate prenatal care. And then there's just, especially in our state, Black women in particularly are dying at such higher levels than white women, people who look like me. Because I think the statistic is out of every 100,000 births, 41 Black mothers die compared to 11.4 white women. So I think a lot of it is just access to prenatal care in a lot of rural areas, and then the stress of being a Black woman right now in America is just, it really affects pregnancy related I can't think of the word.
Oh, no worries. Let me go back to the oversight.
Yeah.
What would that be in your mind? From a legislative standpoint, what should it be?
Well, I think the first thing is that birth centers should be nationally accredited to make sure that they're operating under a certain set of standards. So that would be number one. Okay. Number two is just removing a lot of obstacles that right now that midwives have in our state where, for example, I think it was last legislative session that APRNs, Advanced Practice Nurse, Registered Nurses, finally received, with Governor McMaster's backing, they were able to operate independently of physicians where they didn't have a physician kind of looking over their shoulder or having to really kind of work hand in hand with them because, the VA has really empowered APRNs over the past couple of years and have a lot of faith in them giving adequate care. So same thing with especially nurse midwives because they have such great and knowledgeable experience being able to operate independently because they know what normal birth looks like and they know when it's time to refer to that collaborating OBGYN. I think a lot of oversight issues could be solved, and I think that the work that Charleston Birthplace and other birth center owners have done, working with the SCMA, the South Carolina Medical Association, the Hospital Association, they've really kind of honed in on a great relationship that can work if we can all get the stakeholders to agree on a bill.
Well, how many more stakeholders do you want to bring to the table?
Well, I think there are two more stakeholders, and to be quite honest, I'm not sure. I know that there is not a bill in this legislative session, so I think it's just going to be maybe a matter of time, maybe just kind of cooling things down, and then maybe we'll try to fire it up again.
And let me go back to legislation because obviously, because as you know, you helped Joe Cunningham as far as becoming a congressman.
Mm-hmm.
Now that he's obviously the first congressional district representative for this area, what is that one headline from your journalism days you would write about him?
Oh, he's a consensus builder. I mean, I think, when I was knocking on doors for him in 2018, I would come across a few Republican doors.
Okay.
And 9 times out of 10, those Republicans were telling me that they were going to vote for a Democrat for the first time because they either weren't happy with the candidate, the Republican candidate that they had, or they really, Joe's message really resonated with them, especially with the case of offshore drilling and how if there was a bad outcome with offshore drilling, how impactful it would be on the lives of Low Country residents. So I don't know. It's just he's a consensus builder, and I think he really does a great job representing constituents' voices. Another thing that just happened this week, I was doing text banking for him last year, and for some reason, this voter that I reached out to 6 months later combed through her text messages and responded back to me and just said, "Sorry for the late reply, but I just wanted to let you know Joe will always have my vote. I feel like he really has my back up in DC." So that really, I don't know, it just like gave me goosebumps, just like thinking about that he was able to really capture and bring people together to get get a winning campaign. So,
and obviously someone who brought a lot of people together, regardless of his political affiliation, was Senator Fritz Hollins. Obviously, he passed away just recently.
Yes, he did.
Where are you emotionally?
As far as being a Democrat, or
as him as a person?
Fritz Hollins?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I came to Charleston about 9 years ago, so Fritz Hollins. I've read a lot of amazing things, and I mean, he has a tremendous background here in the state. I personally am not entirely familiar with him because I came after his tenure, but it really seems like a real loss for our area, especially. I mean, I think it was very telling that he asked for his name to be removed from the Judicial Center so someone else could really shine on that building. I think that takes a lot of guts and a lot of humility that, him thinking, I don't need that and I don't belong. My name does not belong on that building. Someone more important belongs on it. I think that really speaks a lot to what he was as a person.
And somebody who's very important in a lot of people's lives, and you just met her, was Elizabeth Warren. You said this on your Facebook page recently, quote, "Today was delightful. Senator Elizabeth Warren is just as smart and amazing as you think she is."
Yeah.
How can she translate that into votes in South Carolina?
That's tough because I think she's having a hard time getting traction here in South Carolina. And, that's a really great question. I'm not entirely sure. I would love to see her spend more time in our state. I know it has to be so complicating for these presidential candidates to try to split their time between Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. But, I really think that the people who attended her panel on, I don't know, Monday. I was just like, what day is it? I really appreciated the diverse panel that she brought in talking about environmental justice because, this is not a black or white issue. This is not a partisan issue. I mean, we are all in this together, and we really need to protect our environment and not only protect our wildlife, but our way of living. I live in Charleston on James Island, and in 50 years, I mean, I don't know where the shoreline is going to end. So it can really be impactful on on their homes and their way of life. So I really appreciate that Senator Warren is really putting climate change and environmental protections in the forefront of her policy outreach.
You talk about environmental justice. What does that look like in 2019?
In 2019, well, I think it's like Jermaine Jenkins of Fresh Future Farms. Like, she's doing an amazing job in North Charleston, where it's such a food desert. So she really filled a need, and she's also educating the community to learn how to grow their own food, and teaching people about, this is a healthy way to eat. And that can be really impactful on healthcare. So, like, empowering people like Jermaine, like lifting her up and letting her being able to just keep doing that outreach. And also really shining a light on how climate change can impact the Gullah Geechee community. How the rising sea level is really kind of chipping away at the land that they own, and also protecting the land that they own and making sure that it's not swallowed up by development. So there's lots of different ways in 2019 that in the environmental justice can play an impact.
Now, how is the Democratic Party helping the Gullah Geechee community?
That's a good question. I think that there are ways that Charleston County Democratic Party has really struggled with in some ways. And I think that outreach into the African American community is something that we've unfortunately struggled with. And so what I hope that with Colleen Condon becoming the new chairwoman, and I don't think that this is our previous chairman's, I don't think that is a fault of his. I think he did a lot for the party, but I think that we could always do more for the Gullah Geechee community or the African American community as a whole. And so that's something that has come up in conversations, and so we're really going to need to partner with people in the community that are already doing the work.
And why so long as far as helping the African American community?
That's a good question. I don't know. I only became a part of, really an active part of the party last year, so that's before my time. But I know that, the party has really changed over the years. From my understanding, that the African American community used to be more involved. So we have to figure out what has changed and how we can come back together.
And when you go back to Joe Cunningham, talk to me about, obviously, because he was big on offshore drilling and saying no to that. Mm-hmm. What else will he say no to as far as being a congressman in your mind?
Well, as far as saying no, I don't know. I think it's yes and no. Like last week I tweeted at him and asked him if he could join the Black Maternity Health Care Caucus. The next day he said that he was, which was really exciting to me because, to me that is such a huge issue. It's also making sure that infrastructure dollars come to our area. So our state has a lot of crumbling roads and bridges. Just making sure that he's looking out for the community. So it's a yes and no.
And obviously, as you know, Colleen Condon is now the new chairwoman for the Charleston County Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. And when you look back at Brady's term, what sticks out in your mind?
Well, Brady raked in the most fundraising money that our party has ever seen. And that really is his strong suit, is fundraising. So that enabled us to have a huge GOTV effort for 2018. And Brady, because I'm so new to the party leadership in general, I can really speak to the fundraising issue. But I feel I'm so thankful for him because when I came to him with the idea of really re-energizing precinct organization, he just said, this is your thing. Go ahead and do it, and I'll support you 100%. So I really am thankful that he empowered me to be able to do the job that I did last year. So.
And when you go back to those precincts, how much? Did you get a lot of paper ballots, or were there more electronic ballots in your mind?
Well, it wasn't necessarily. It wasn't necessarily really translating votes. Like, we weren't going door to door getting absentee applications. Okay. It was just mostly just talking to the people in the community. I can't tell you how many times I knocked on a Democrat's door and they were just like, I'm not the only Democrat on the street. Like they felt so alone.
Okay.
And they were shocked that a Democrat was knocking on their door. So that really empowered them into knowing, you know, I'm not the only one. There are so many people out there who believe in the same things that I believe in, that care about these issues, and are fighting for me to get the job done in the courthouse, the state house, or in the Capitol building in D.C.
How many local seats do you all want to capture next?
You know, the sky's the limit. I mean, I want to get to a place where there is equity
Okay.
in the state house. I care. My passion lies mostly in Columbia. I want to see better representation and equal distribution of power among the two political parties, or more political parties. I mean, once we get to that point where there are more women serving, there's only 15% of our state house is composed of women, which in our state, I believe there are maybe 52% women. So women in particular are very underrepresented in the state house. But once we have better equilibrium of the power structure in Columbia, I think we'll see a huge shift in the dynamics of power.
Amber Allen, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Thanks.
Thank you.